think there are quite a range of possibilities here, but let me just mention a few that seem particularly important to me. The first is that I think that if North and South Korea were to come together, it would be a little bit like a marriage. And the important thing about a marriage is that people are not making just a contract, they're making a covenant. That is a binding commitment that, in sickness and in health, whether there's economic prosperity or whether there isn't, or whatever the political circumstances in Russia or China or the US or whatever, there is a covenant here. There is a commitment, a binding commitment that we will stay together. We're not going to separate ever again. And that covenant is fundamental to the political system working. Everyone knows this is for good. We've got to work it out. And that's got to be how it is between North and South Korea and between the citizens of North and South Korea. They've got to come together with a covenant, in my view. That's fundamental. The second principle, I think, is that it's going to be very important for representatives of the two Koreas to get together and to say, well, what are the values that we really share? We all agree on certain things as Koreans. One thing that struck me about Korea is the extraordinary generosity and kindness and even hospitality of Korean people. Koreans always seem to go to greet one another with a gift. I mean, they just love to do it. They don't have to do it, they just love to do it. So it seems to me that the principle of generosity and hospitality, the principle perhaps of fairness, compassion, those sort of principles are characteristic of all Koreans, and they need to be agreed and stated within some sort of document that everyone agrees, yes, these are our values. They may need some negotiation, discussion to get it just right, and though people who make those decisions should be from both Koreas, they should come together and spend some time trying to decide what those values are. I think there are some particular Korean words which don't come readily to mind, I'm afraid, but I'm thinking of two particular Korean words, Hongik Ingan and Jaesei Iwa. Yes, those two especially. I think the third principle that Koreans could consider is the principle of what's called subsidiarity, that that decision-making should occur as far as possible where the responsibilities lie for the outcome. So you want to try and link the decision to where the outcome occurs. And that means that you are always pushing decisions further down the political system, not centralizing to the top, but pushing them down so as many people as possible participate in making the decisions that affect their lives. And fourthly, I think we all recognize that everyone needs accountability if there's not going to be corruption. So the issue, the principle there is the one of accountability. What is going to be an effective form of accountability for a politician, for a judge, for a senior executive in a corporation, to make sure there is minimum corruption and that things are done honestly and openly and transparently? And the fifth one is that there should be as much contact as possible between representatives of people and the people themselves. So if you're going to elect somebody to be your member of parliament, for example, how can you get to know them? How can you access them? How can you talk to them if you have a concern? How can you maximize that interaction between a citizen and their representative? That seems to me also a very important principle for government. The simplest form of reunification would simply be to have a single nation state with a single form of election system, and everybody votes for members of parliament and a president within a very unified structure. That's the simplest, but not necessarily the most satisfactory, or the one that gives the greatest sense of ownership and participation. So you could have a federal government where Korea is divided into, let's say there are 18 provinces, so everybody votes effectively for their provincial leaders, and then the provincial leaders come together and choose who will be the national president, perhaps on a rotating basis. Now that's a more complicated system, but it does mean that people feel more ownership of the outcome in many respects, and you don't get into a situation, for example, which you've had in South Korea, where 51% of people vote for one side and 49% on the other, and it's winner takes all. So the winner of the 51% gets total power over the whole nation 5 years, and the 49% feel disenfranchised. All they can do is wait for the next election. If it's done at a provincial level, and most of the decisions are made, or as far as possible are made at a provincial level, and then the provincial leaders choose the national leader, then it isn't so much a winner-takes-all situation. It's more evenly distributed so that people feel more comfortable with the outcomes. They at least control the outcome of their own province, probably, even if they don't get the particular president they would have liked. A third possible form of government would be a confederation, where North Korea is considered like one state or sub-state, and then the other one is South Korea, and they come together and form a single country. So the country is a confederation of two blocks who come together to form one country, and they have to have a decision-making committee or council with representatives from the two sides, which also has to take into account the different sizes of populations and other things. So there are different ways in which you can structure the government to reflect these values, but I think the main thing is to be clear about what the values are.